Russia is blaming Ukraine for a pair of high-impact strikes that cut into the heart of its oil economy, a fire at an oil depot near the Black Sea resort of Sochi, and a sophisticated drone attack that hit Shadow Fleet operations at the Primorsk oil terminal on the Baltic Sea. Together, they form a clear pattern. Ukraine is not only targeting military assets, it is attacking the financial arteries that keep Moscow's war machine running. Shortly after midnight on September 12, 2025, two fully loaded tankers sat at Primorsk, preparing to sail with millions of barrels of crude. Russian crews went about their routines. Radar operators watched their screens. Nothing looked unusual, until it did. On long-range displays, operators suddenly saw dozens of faint, low observable returns stretching across almost 1,000 kilometers. The signatures were small, fast, and headed for Russian airspace. Sirens sounded. Interceptors scrambled. Air defense crews powered up engagement radars and fired. To the Russian command staff, it seemed like a textbook response, layer after layer of S-400 batteries, Panzer systems, and supporting radars engaging an incoming threat and knocking it down. But Ukraine had set a trap. The initial wave was not the main strike. It was a deliberate, choreographed deception using cheap decoy drones designed to be seen, tracked, and destroyed. Their purpose was to force Russia to spend time, attention, and missiles away from the real target, the energy infrastructure and Shadow Fleet tankers at Primorsk. For Moscow, the stakes were obvious. The Shadow Fleet, an opaque network of aging tankers under flags of convenience, with hidden ownership and shifting registrations, has been central to moving sanctioned Russian oil to willing buyers. These ships operate with transponders switched off, conduct ship-to-ship transfers at sea, and disguise cargo origins. Protecting them is protecting revenue, and protecting revenue is protecting the war. This was not the first time Ukraine had hit the Shadow Fleet. In late June, a tanker linked to Russian exports suffered a major explosion in the Mediterranean, reportedly while carrying more than 1 million barrels of crude. Industry chatter by mid-2025 suggested at least 5 similar incidents, enough to push some owners to deploy divers and underwater drones to scan hulls for mines. The message was landing. Shadow shipping is not safe. At Primorsk, the message grew louder. As more than 70 drones appeared on radar, Russian defenders assumed the worst, a direct attack on vessels at the port. They were partly right, but they missed the timing and the method. Ukraine had split the strike package. Roughly half the drones were disposable decoys, built with simple materials that yield low radar signatures. The rest were the main force, extended-range one-way strike drones with 40-kilogram warheads, escorted by electronic warfare platforms configured to jam fire control radars and cluttered decision-maker screens. The plan was to make Russia do exactly what it did. Engagement radars locked on, missile batteries cycled through intercepts, and crews tracked apparent threats streaking towards St. Petersburg and points across Leningrad Oblast. Dozens of drones were shot down. Yet each intercept created a brief blind spot, a momentary gap in coverage that the next wave could exploit. Through those gaps, a smaller assassination squad of 7 modified long-range drones slipped near the port, flying low, quiet, and deadly. What followed was surgical. 2 strike drones slammed into Primorsk's heart. One hit the main control building with a thermobaric payload that overpressurized the structure. The other tore into the pipeline manifold, triggering ruptures and secondary explosions. Additional hits damaged pumping stations, loading arms, and critical valves. Fires spread. Emergency shutdowns failed to complete. At the pier, 2 Aframax-class tankers, identified in open sources as Kusto and Kayun, were hit in quick succession, one at the bridge and electronics, another at cargo areas and loading systems. Both ships, flagged and registered in ways typical of Shadow Fleet practices, were heavily damaged. Within minutes, Primorsk looked like a war zone, burning tankers, a gutted pumping station, and crippled handling infrastructure. Russia's defense ministry later claimed it had shot down hundreds of drones across the country and repelled all attacks. Satellite imagery and on-scene video told a different story. Primorsk, which handles roughly a fifth of Russia's seaborne oil exports and supports an annual export value in the tens of billions of dollars, took a direct hit to its operational core. Even temporary disruption at such a node translates into significant daily revenue losses in insurance, logistics, and reputational headache for Russian sellers and buyers alike. The Primorsk operation also served as a live demonstration of Ukraine's evolving long-range strike doctrine. First, extend the reach. Use upgraded A-frames with added fuel and optimized engines to cover distances on the order of 1,000 kilometers with a meaningful warhead. Second, stack deception. Mix cheap plywood body decoys that invite intercepts with hardened strike drones that slip through the gaps. Third, pair the package with electronic escorts whose job is not to blind everything, but to flood specific channels with interference and false tracks at decisive moments. The effect is to overwhelm target selection and slow the defender's kill chain just enough for the real shots to arrive. Primorsk was only the start. Within hours, Ukraine's intelligence service claimed responsibility for another high-profile strike, a major fire at the Bashnev-Novo refinery in Ufa, one of Russia's largest processing complexes. The location, roughly 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, mattered as much as the damage, hitting deep inside Russia's signal that distance alone would not protect key assets. Then came a strike near St. Petersburg on the Katashi-Kinev refinery, one of the country's biggest by capacity. Even where intercepts succeeded, falling debris sparked fires on refinery grounds and knocked units offline, according to industry reporting. Officials downplayed the impact, but the operational reality was clear. Every day a large refinery sits idle costs millions in output and erodes confidence in the system. Another reported strike reached even farther, a hit on the Metafrax Chemicals complex in the Urals, among Russia's largest methanol producers and the site of a recently opened ammonia-urea melamine facility. Ammonia is a backbone input for fertilizers, explosives, and multiple industrial processes. Even minor damage at a plant like Metafrax ripples through supply chains. More importantly, the location, nearly 2,000 kilometers from Kiev, sent an unmistakable signal. Nowhere is entirely out of reach. The cumulative effect of these operations has been to constrict Russia's refining capacity and scramble its oil logistics. Estimates circulating in the energy trade have put refining output at multi-year lows during peak strike periods, forcing Moscow to prioritize domestic fuel over exports and reducing seaborne shipments year on year. Damage at Primorsk complicated export planning and reportedly prompted adjustments in crude flows at other Baltic ports to offset losses. Meanwhile, softening crude prices and currency moves have squeezed oil and gas revenues relative to the previous year, amplifying the financial pressure. None of this happens in a vacuum. Russia remains one of the world's largest oil exporters, and energy income continues to underwrite its war. Even with sanctions, discounted sales keep money flowing. To dodge those restrictions, the Shadow fleet grew, by some account to around 1,000 older vessels with more than 100 million tons of deadweight capacity by mid-2025. This fleet has been central to Russia's sanctions-busting strategy. It is also now squarely in Ukraine sights. Days before the Primorsk strike, Ukrainian forces hit a specialized Russian fleet support vessel in the Black Sea near Novorossiysk. The platform, part of a small class used for reconnaissance, rescue, and recovery, carries a price tag in the tens of millions of dollars and plays an outsized role in sustaining naval operations. Damaging it reduced Russia's flexibility at sea and added to a long list of maritime losses since 2022, when Ukraine famously sank the cruiser Moskva with anti-ship missiles. Each successful strike compounds the cost and complexity of Russian operations, from patrols to repairs to logistics. Kiev is also pressing the economic fight through policy. Ukrainian officials have outlined sanctions proposals targeting hundreds of vessels and multiple companies and individuals involved in Russia's oil trade and military supply chains, including entities outside Russia. Western governments have expanded their own lists, singling out ships and operators suspected of moving Russian oil and the firms supplying components used in weapons. The aim is to raise the cost and risk of participating in the shadow economy that supports Russia's war. For Russia, the energy sector is both shield and vulnerability. Oil and gas finance the state budget, the security services, and the wartime industrial base. But the infrastructure is fixed, sprawling, and hard to defend against long-range, low-cost drones and creative targeting. Ports, refineries, pumping stations, control buildings, loading arms, pipeline manifolds. Each facility has critical nodes whose loss can halt operations. Dispersing assets helps, but redundancy is expensive and time-consuming to build. Replacing specialized equipment can take months. Insurance premiums rise. Buyers hesitate. Traders demand discounts. The cumulative drag is real. Ukraine's strategy is simple in concept and hard to counter in practice. Stretch the defender, saturate the sensors, waste the interceptors, and then hit the choke points that matter most. It forces Russia to spend resources on air defense across a vast geography while accepting that some percentage of drones will get through. It also compels Russia to make trade-offs between protecting frontline units and protecting refineries, between keeping exports flowing and keeping fuel at home, between maintaining the appearance of control and acknowledging damage that is plainly visible from space. The strikes have also demonstrated a maturing Ukrainian industrial ecosystem. Long-range, one-way drones built on inexpensive airframes, software optimized for terrain-hugging autonomous navigation, electronic warfare kits adapted from target drones, and modular payloads that range from armor-piercing to thermobaric. All of it reflects a cycle of rapid design, test, and fielding under war conditions. Losses are expected and priced in. Success is measured in restored deterrence, reduced enemy revenue, and strategic leverage. Officials in Moscow can claim intercept numbers in the hundreds, but the visible outcomes at key sites tell their own story. At Primorsk, fires and structural damage force immediate shutdowns and emergency responses. Near St. Petersburg, refinery units went dark. In the Urals, a chemicals complex registered hits. Civil aviation diverted flights, and regional authorities issued updates to calm public concern. Each event tightened constraints on Russia's energy and logistics system and increases the cost of continuing the war. Meanwhile, Ukraine and its partners are trying to make the Shadow Fleet less shadowy. By identifying ships, flag states, shell companies, and insurers, and then sanctioning or restricting them, they aim to cut off the pathways that allow sanctioned oil to move. The more transparent and risky shadow shipping becomes, the more expensive it gets, and the more its margins erode. Combined with physical strikes on export and refining nodes, the pressure mounts from both directions. The broader geopolitical narrative will continue to be contested online and on state media, but the operational reality is becoming harder to spin. When a port that handles 20% of a country's seaborne exports burns, markets notice. When a refinery that processes hundreds of thousands of barrels per day goes offline, the downstream consequences are immediate. When a chemicals plant deep in the interior takes a hit, executives across the sector revisit contingency plans. And when naval support vessels are damaged or destroyed, fleets rethink their posture. Ukraine's message is blunt. The energy network that sustains Russia's war is within reach. Expect more of the same. More long-range raids, more feints and decoys, more electronic harassment of radars, more attempt to force defenders into the wrong choices at the wrong time. Expect more sanctioned packages and more international emphasis on flagging, ensuring, and financing opaque shipping. And expect the cumulative economic effect to get harder for Russia to absorb, even if day-to-day oil flows continue. Whether this pressure compels Moscow to change course is uncertain. Russia has found ways to rear out exports, cultivate buyers willing to accept risk, and keep the budget funded, albeit at growing cost. But the trend line is clear. Ukraine is no longer content to fight only at the front. It is striking at the systems that finance the front. As long as those systems remain vulnerable and within range, the economic war will intensify alongside the military one. What began with a spectacular night of explosions at Primorsk and a blaze near Sochi has now moved inland to refineries and chemical plants and outward to the grey world of shadow shipping. The target set is broad, the methods are scalable, and the strategic logic is straightforward. By forcing Russia to defend everywhere and succeed perfectly every night, a standard no defender can meet indefinitely, Ukraine is shifting the cost calculus of the war. That shift is already visible in disrupted exports, strained refining, and rising uncertainty. It is visible in the flames captured by satellites, the shutdown notices issued by plant managers, and the rerouted tankers idling offshore. It is visible in the increasingly elaborate explanations from officials who insist nothing of consequence was hit, even as smoke billows behind them. In short, Ukraine has found a pressure point and is pressing it. The strikes are not random. They are designed to cut revenue, shake confidence, and expose the limits of Russia's air defense umbrella when confronted with mass, range, and deception. If Kiev continues on this path, combining physical disruption with regulatory and financial squeeze, then the core claim behind this moment becomes harder to dispute. Ukraine is systematically shattering what's left of Russia's economic power to wage war.